Edward Nelson was sent to Alaska by the United States Meteorological Service.
He was located for 4 years between 1877 and 1881 at St. Michael's. He wasn't content to simply sit and make observations on the weather.
The Smithsonian hired him to simultaneously collect things because it had been about 10 years from the time we had purchased Alaska from Russia, and the United States knew very little about Alaska, so they needed information.
He made many excursions into the outlying areas, including the lower Yukon, the lower Kuskokwim rivers, and up into the Norton Sound area. Probably the one significant thing about the Inua collection, or the Edward Nelson collection, is the fact that it has, 10,000 items to begin with. That in itself is significant, just in sheer numbers. But what makes it even more significant beyond sheer numbers is the quality and the type of material that was collected. He was more interested in the objects that were used in everyday living. But in the process of collecting that material, he was very selective. And so consequently, we have a tremendous collection of material that normally would have been lost since it was in everyday use.
He documented every piece that he collected, where it was collected, who it was collected by, as much information about it as he could find out, how it was used, what it was used for. The people that he collected the artifacts from called him the man who collects good-for-nothing things.
But of course we know today that it was a very fortuitous occasion that he chose rather commonplace items.
The basement of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. had for decades been the repository of Nelson's 10,000-piece collection. Then one day in 1977, Ann Stevens, the wife of Alaska's senior senator, asked if she might see any items from her home state. She was amazed to discover the Nelson collection and appalled that it languished unseen. Her concern, expressed in part through her husband, resulted in the addition of a new gallery and the premiere opening of the Nelson collection in the nation's capital in June of 1982. It was titled Inua, Spirit World of the Bering Sea Eskimo. The word Inua in Yupik Eskimo means spirit, and many who have seen the Nelson collection have felt its presence.
They do have in the most traditional and even contemporary native value system, an inner life, a spirit, if you will, that is there. And that when they are taken out of context and simply put into a case, that tends to short fuse or short circuit the real intrinsic value of the piece.
With that idea in mind, Alaska State Museum officials asked for permission to bring a representative sample of Nelson's 10,000 pieces back to their homeland, not just to look at, but to learn from. The Smithsonian readily agreed, and some 300 pieces were selected to make the journey from whence they had come. They arrived in June 1983. By that time, a plan to use them as living history had already been set in motion.
To that end, we are trying through a program associated with this exhibit to have elders interpret the pieces as they understand them from their tradition bearers, their fathers and forefathers, as to what the meaning, of these pieces are. This they will interpret in their own language. This information will be passed on to students who are also working with the elders from some major communities up north. And so it's towards that end that we'd hope to perpetuate a living culture.
So what we need to do is take a look at the description to see if it's accurate or where we can make corrections.
Right, what to correct, what to add, what more you know about the things. And in particular,
The process of debriefing with the elders was undertaken in Juneau shortly after the arrival of the traveling portion of the Nelson collection. In June of 1983, a group of elders, accompanied by high school students from the same regions, were brought to the State Museum to examine the 300 pieces and pass along their recollections of the names of each item in their respective dialects, the purpose it served, and the way they remembered it being used.
oh, I just really enjoy, hearing people talk about these things. And, Pauline wanting to talk about that pipe. Boy, she knew an old lady when she was a kid that used to smoke this really long pipe. She would come and watch that lady smoke that pipe. She never got to try it, and she couldn't wait until we got to talk about that pipe. And I really appreciate their willingness to teach us too. Not only their own children and grandchildren, but to share it with all of the rest of us so freely.
The students' task was to listen and learn, to take the knowledge the elders related about each of the exhibit items and bring it back to their fellow students.
We're going to tell them what the artifacts mean and what they were used for.
It was like it was part of the past for me. You just use things that are stored somewhere that's made, things that are been used or stored back, like the old tools.
They weren't here. People wouldn't even probably be able to get to see them because they'd be lost or something like that. They'd be gone with the people.
It's like part of the history.
While in the state capitol, the students took time out to see a number of points of interest, among them the governor's mansion.
I'm Connie Stewart, and I'm the manager here at the governor's house. And just one of my very jobs is taking groups on tour. The U.S. Congress, with Alaska being a territory, gave Alaska $40,000, and that was to build the house and to furnish it. And
The way our kids learn today, they have to read about something and look at it at the same time, They're not like us old people.
Looking at?
Yeah, looking at them and working with them and, using them, but they don't use them anymore, so they have to read them and, get an understanding, because that's how they're trained to think, So perhaps my suggestion would be to go see the exhibit and start working,
As the elders began their work, the exhibit was still being assembled by members of the staff of the State Museum in Juneau. A painstaking process of sorting, grouping, building display cases, ensuring proper humidity, and maintaining minimum light levels to protect the 100-year-old artifacts from deterioration. First, there had to be an overall display plan. That job fell to Bruce Cato, exhibits curator at the State Museum.
What we did is work up a working model. So to speak, what we have done is cut out, papered all sorts of things and pasted up onto a working model to see how things would fit. What we needed to do is go ahead and fabricate all of the pedestals, the hangers, again, the cases, the lighting system, and so forth. And it's very difficult, especially when you're doing hangers, to mount a piece. It has to be done in a certain way where it's not creating stress on an object.
The show on an outline is divided into 7 categories, but the first category is really introduction panels. It doesn't include any artifacts. The second part is small, general. Then it goes into Eskimo life through the seasons, basically hunting, fishing, berry picking, how people made a living off of the land through the seasons. Then the 4th unit goes into household, making utensils, cooking, toys, things like that were done in the house. The 5th unit is called the Gaskic, and it deals with with basically men's activities, and that contains a lot of fine woodworking and masks and shamanistic items. And then the show goes on to changes in the Eskimo arts through contact with Western civilization, ivory carving, for trade. And then in the 20th century art, you'll find in the big section on the seasons of the Eskimo, open water hunting, for instance, from kayaks and umiaks. There's a beautiful umiak model and a kayak model as well. The harpoons that are used for seals, which are different than the harpoons used for walrus. There are fishing materials for fishing in streams in the summer and in the winter, fishing lures, tomcod jigging apparatus for jigging fish through the ice, berry picking containers, bow, a very nice bow, and various types of arrows that were used in various types of hunting. Going into the household area, there are some serving dishes, ladles, some very nice sewing utensils that were used by the women. There are examples of children's toys, various kinds of grass basketry. And then going into the gaskig section, or the more ceremonial section, there are a number of fine wooden boxes, some of which have the lids open, and you can see the paintings that were done inside them, the lids, and a lot of masks, and also some material relating to the shaman and the shaman's work. These are items that have definite, specific spiritual connections.
I mean, they're reverent and creative and functionally elegant all at the same time. And it's kind of grown on me, just seeing these pieces over a long period of time, how deeply whoever made these pieces must have cared about the animals, how close that feeling is. One thing I could mention that a Yupik person said to me was that in Christianity coming into his area, there was a lot that they were speaking of the same God to him. It wasn't something foreign at all. And there were things that they too could learn from Christianity. And the one place that he can't understand, that he feels the difference is that he feels that when the Creator made people and gave us a soul, likewise he made animals and gave each of the animals a spirit. And that's a real strong feeling for him.
Looking at the craftsmanship that went into the making of these items of everyday use, many from the white culture are struck by the great amounts of time invested in each piece. Mari Slack says that kind of thinking would probably have been foreign to the Bering Sea dwellers.
I don't get a feeling of them talking about investing time as if time was something that you saved or spent or used, or you just didn't talk about it that way. I mean, you cared about those animals and you respected them, and when you went to make a harpoon point and the line attachers and the spear guards and everything that you use in going out to seal hunt, you did it with reverence. And you made things as you felt about the animals, and it was a respectful thing to do to make them well.
When I look at them, I think our generation just lives too fast, and we want to get things done in a hurry. We have deadlines. We're always in a hurry. And then I look at these beautiful things, the hooks that are decorated, these other things with decorations, and I see how much patience they have and their appreciation of beauty, as well as utility. And it impresses me.
With even modern tools, we can't compare with the beauty they made 100 years ago. Just a box, this means umbak.
Would be a toolbox.
That's what she said, it's a toolbox.
I think one of the important things about the exhibition is that these pieces are coming back to Alaska for the first time in 100 years. And it's culturally very important because it gives people an opportunity to get back in touch with part of the culture that is perhaps no longer there. They recognize pieces that they've either seen themselves or seen a relative use or used themselves. And it's very exciting, I think, to them to see the pieces. And each piece is very beautiful. there's a great respect for the material that the artifact is made from. And you probably know that the people who made them believed that every object has a spirit, animals, people, and things. And as you view some of those pieces, you begin to get that feeling yourself and feel the spirit of that particular piece. In addition to this large exhibit of some 300 pieces, they selected 122 pieces for a small exhibition that would go to some of the areas and communities where the pieces were actually collected. So it's going to Dillingham, Bethel, Barrow, Kotzebue, and Nome. The smaller collection is being packaged here in this museum and will be shipped to those 5 communities.
They were picked by Bill Fitzhugh, William Fitzhugh at the Smithsonian. This show, Inua, was curated by William Fitzhugh and Susan Kaplan, who are anthropology curators at the Smithsonian. And it's a traveling exhibit, so our role in this is as renters of the exhibit for a certain period of time. We've also coordinated the arrangements for touring it to Fairbanks and Anchorage as well. This show will be going to 9 different museums. Ottawa, following Alaska, I believe. It'll be at the Field Museum in Chicago in the winter. It'll be coming back to Seattle to the Burke Museum at the University of Washington. Prior to its arrival in Juneau, it was at the Bowers Museum in Santa Ana, California.
What we're hoping will happen with this project is that we will see the collection through the eyes of the elders, and we'll get a great deal of information about the artifacts from their experiences. The young people will be learning how to be interpreters of that collection when it comes back to their community. So they will be representing the collection to the people who live there.
We asked the elders how they felt about their ancestors' possessions being taken away by Nelson.
I think that was good.
I think that was great.
To preserve all the old stuff, otherwise we wouldn't see them now.
Especially to
or
put
we
it in
wouldn't know
books.
them.
I think it's for the benefit of our cultures very good. Otherwise we would have lost all that if we hadn't done this work.
It's certainly a great thing for Alaska to see the collection come back to its homeland, really, and to allow our native people to act as in an interpretive fashion for us, to review the exhibits and to go through them from the standpoint that it is a part of Alaska's culture, and I guess would go so far as to say that it really does belong here.
We asked State Museum Director Alan Monroe about the likelihood of repatriation of collections like Nelson's.
The Smithsonian, being the national museum, is certainly mandated, I presume by federal statute somewhere, to hold those collections in public trust in perpetuity. To what extent any of that material would be decentralized and returned to the areas from whence it was collected is a good question. And I think it's one probably at some point in time for the courts. I think that what we would be looking at in a more immediate future, in a more reasonable vein, would be that of loan of material back to areas that can now give it proper care.
If the accommodations are good, but rather keep it up in Alaska, but I don't know if we have any sufficient type of to secure all that 100-year-old stuff. It's pretty delicate, and you have to have some sort of chemical or whatever to preserve it.
My name is Juneau McIntyre. I'm from the village of Vik. It's on the lower Kuskokwim, where the Kuskokwim empties into the lower part of the Bering Sea. We are the Nunamda dancers from the Bethel region. Nunamda in our language means of our land. So we are dancers of our land. We're here for a very important reason, of course, the Inua, or the Yoa in our region, the inner essence of things, animals, of animate objects. I had seen them in Washington. And after I saw them for 2 days, I would drift back into the exhibition, and it was just amazing to me. And in our group, we felt that we should authenticate, bring back, maintain, continue, whatever it takes, some of these things that were used by our ancestors. They are living works of art, living, and they need to continue to live through us, the elders, the young people, and generations to come. Dances are fragments of history. We dance of things we love, we cherish, things we see every day, things we experience of life, and things we hope for and hope to be. The things you see here are amazing, and they're neat. And I think more people need to see them to appreciate who they are. If they can see them and recreate them again, we have a chance to be able to recreate them as they once were. And we must share, because if you don't share something, it'll never continue.
Edward Nelson did a fine job in collecting what were considered to be everyday items. But nevertheless, as far as this exhibit is concerned, I'm really impressed with the kinds of things that he did collect. And even if he does have the nickname of the person who collected worthless things, I give him full credit for having done it. And I think the people of the Bering Sea will be very happy that he did. And a building block will fit in place as time goes on. And that we can be extremely thankful for.
Throughout the summer and fall of 1983, the two-part Inua collection traveled to 8 Alaskan communities and was seen by an estimated audience of 75,000. The main exhibit will travel to Ottawa, Chicago, Seattle, and Winnipeg before returning to the Smithsonian. In January 1984, the State Museum received permission to keep the small traveling collection for an additional year. An effort is now underway to secure funding to bring the exhibit to additional villages, sharing once again the supposed good-for-nothing things of Edward Nelson.
And we must share, because if you don't share something, it'll never continue.